There are a couple aspects of Recessional that popped out that I thought that we could look at together. First of all, just the religious tone of the poem. Recessional starts us off with religious aspect, and obviously the first word of the poem is God. So there's a religious aspect to this, and I think the most important way that I've come to understand this is that religion is something that is true, that is independent of the believer. That, I think, is the key to unlocking this poem, is that Kipling's arguing there's something true whether people believe it or not. And that's sort of a key idea of all monotheistic religions. But I think he invokes that to talk a bit about empire and responsibility. Even in the first stanza, we have a couple of nice examples of empire. The idea of a far-flung battle line, and then the contrast between palm trees and pine trees, discussing the sort of full extent of the British Empire. Of course, at the end of the first stanza and at the end of the subsequent stanzas, except for the last one, we have our refrain, lest we forget, lest we forget. And I think that I've struggled a bit with what the word lest means. I think on the one hand, it could mean in case we forget, in case we forget. On the other hand, it could mean so that we don't forget, so that we don't forget. I'm not sure if I've settled on a proper meaning there, but those are the two that I'm grappling with. What is it that we might forget, or what is it that we shouldn't forget? And I think that the key there comes in the third stanza, when we're looking at Nineveh and Tyre and other empires that have fallen away. So if what we should forget, or what we shouldn't forget, is that all empires have fallen. Well, so what is it that we need to remember then? How does that information help us in the British Empire in the Diamond Jubilee? And it seems that the key phrase here is wild tongues that have not thee in awe. So empires that do not believe in some ideology outside of their own power, that seems to be what Kipling is criticizing here. Use of or lesser breeds without the law, I think especially in the context of white man's burden, it might be easy to see that as racially tinged, and certainly the word breed could be racial. I don't think that it necessarily has to be here, and George Orwell actually does a commentary on this poem and explicitly goes out of his way to point out the ways in which he believes that lesser breeds is actually just referring to continental Europeans, probably Germans. So I think there isn't quite the same racial tinge here, and I think that the negative comparisons that are made here are not between imperial people and conquered people, but rather between different types of empires. And I think the lest we forget is Kipling's claim that we are an empire that is built on an ideology. We are an empire that has principles, in contrast to some other unnamed empires. And then that is something that we can see that Kipling had in mind in both poems that he wrote. There is a responsibility and there is a right way to do things. And in that sense, Recessional, while being much more somber, is also sort of an excuse or an apology for empire, because ours is the good empire. And somehow his acknowledgement that forgetting is possible and the humility that he brings to the poem actually makes empire seem even more palatable. Those are just a couple of thoughts. I hope those help you with the questions.